Bring to us your poetry from inspiration sought. Come join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform's here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 15 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Bergio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Bergio. Phil, welcome.
Thank you.
Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and invite you to do the same. I want to start by saying thank you to all of our guests, and especially our listeners who have made You're the Poet possible. We hope you enjoy the podcast and the poetry that is shared here. Our featured guest for this episode of You're the Poet is Diana Kouprina. Diana, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We're glad you could join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode. To start things off, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to read our classic poem for the episode. Phil?
Yeah, this is a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson. He was born November 13th, 1850. He died December 3rd, 1894, 44 years old. He was in poor health most of his life, moved to Samoa where he had a stroke. The books that he wrote, Treasure Island, Kidnapped, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, he wrote in that area when he was sick, almost bedridden. Matt, when I mentioned him, what do you think of?
Yeah, usually Treasure Island.
Treasure Island, but he was a prolific poetry writer. He was one of the most influential children's poem writer. The poem I'm going to read is from one of his books, From a Child's Garden of Verses. This is one of 64 poems. It was written in 1885. Into the Land of Nod. From breakfast on through all day, at home among my friends I stay, but every night I go abroad, afar into the land of Nod. All by myself I have to go, with none to tell me what to do, all alone besides the streams, and up the mountain sides of dreams. The strangest things are these for me, both things to eat and things to see, and many frightening sights abroad, till morning in the land of Nod. Try as I like to find the way, I never can get back by day, nor can remember plain and clear the curious music that I hear. Robert Louis Stevenson, From a Child's Garden of Verses.
All right, thank you for sharing. I've heard of that poem before. I think I've read some of his works from that volume. I've always liked that. It sounds like it's a poem written for children, and that kind of adventure to far off lands. And also sort of like a poem that could be written kind of like a lullaby, like something that parents might read a child before they're nodding off to sleep.
When you think of it, Treasure Island with young Jim, it's like an adventure book for young boys.
Right.
And that's one of my favorite Robert Louis Stevenson books, the movies. There's like about 12 movies made on that subject.
Nice. Diana, any thoughts there?
I love the rhythm of it. It does have that lullaby feel to it, as you've mentioned. It just extremely has that soothing rhythm that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, from there, I'm going to share a poem for the episode. This is a sonnet I wrote some years ago, and it came to me recently because I feel like I've got so much going on that I can't keep track of everything and that I'm so busy. Brought back the memory of this sonnet, and I thought I'd share it on this episode. It's called To Need More Time. Deadlines, schedules, a calendar, and clock. Meetings at work and then working at home. Never a moment to finish this poem or analyze Mozart, Haydn, or Bach. Run from the office to stores round the block, my brain's in a whirl of fog, haze, and foam. I'm tired of having to hurry and roam as part of the world's powerless flock. It's time to stop along life's trodden path, to stop and smell the roses by the stream, then put aside the stress that causes wrath, and live a life that lets a poet dream. No deadlines, schedules, no worries, no more, just time for my thoughts to blossom and soar. Matthew Bergio.
It's another one I haven't heard. But like Matt says, there's a lot of his poems I haven't heard.
I love this one. I can relate to the feelings and the struggle. I feel you on that. I love the words of the poem.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of us struggle with that, especially if we're not doing our hobbies or our art full time. Like I think for a lot of poets and writers, that tends to be the case where we feel like we don't have the time that we want to dedicate to writing. Life and our day jobs get in the way sometimes.
Right.
All right, from there, we're going to turn it back over to Phil to share his poem for this episode.
I got this inspiration of a poem when I was mowing my lawn. I have a lot of pokeweed, and the berries are dark blue. And I remember once Matt made an ink. He smashed up the pokeberries, and he used a pen, and he wrote a letter to his friend in pokeberry ink. And I got the inspiration of this poem with that. The old way. With laptops and PCs, these the modern day, many poets write this digital way. What of the old way, having a pen in hand to write and create something as grand? So I picked up a long turkey quill and found an ancient old inkwell and filled it up with pokeberry wine, and all this suits me just fine. I began to write, was in my head, and thoughts of poets long, long dead. I imagined that this is how they scripted their poems with wrinkled brow. Their ideas scratched on the paper's white, their thoughts would dance and take flight, creating poems for all to read, for others to enjoy and need. Visions of the great minds they were, and creating the works that we hold dear. Philip Bergio.
All right, thank you for sharing. I like that. As I was reading it the other day, it reminded me of how I've kind of come almost full circle. When I started my poetic journey, well, even as a kid, we did some writing on the old word processor that you had. But then when I started really writing poetry on my own accord in late high school, I was doing it on the first computer I ever owned, the good old compact Presario. And then I kind of switched over years after that to being serious about writing it, quote unquote, the old way, not necessarily with a quill pen, but notebook and paper. I have poetry notebooks that I would write in, and that's where I jot down my ideas because I like the idea that I can scratch things out but still read it.
I love the smell of ink on paper.
Yes.
And the paper becomes a bit crinkly and there's that scent. Sorry, I had to interject with that.
Oh, no, I agree with you there.
The wood processor, that's the one with the crank on the side that we had. That was old. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. But no, I do love that. I do love to write on paper, and not even like just the smell, but also, I, undeniably get ink on my hands, and I just feel like there's something about that. Like, I think it reminds me of that scene out of Shakespeare in Love where his hands are kind of ink covered as he's there, writing his plays and his sonnets. But now to get back into writing poetry, talk about needing more time. I found myself going back to the electronic version and doing it on my phone. But I still try to not just delete my mistakes. I'll just skip a line and use asterisks to keep my original train of thought going.
I do the same thing, actually. Exactly right there with you. I was starting to feel bad, maybe that I should be writing more on paper, but I did the same switch just to save time.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my phone with me all the time, so I can always just jot things down, jot down thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I like to write haikus, and I'll write them on napkins, paper towels, because they just come to me, and I just like writing haikus. So I'll write on paper, and the paper is anything, like my recipes. So I love to cook, and thinking of recipes, I'll grab a napkin and start writing it down on a napkin, and hopefully I transcribe it.
Right, so we can save them.
So you can save them, right?
All right, from here we want to move to our guest section of the episode. Diana, you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
Sure. I was thinking quite some time what I should share since you've approached me, and I figured I will be sporadic and go with a little bit of improv and share one of the poems that was published in Wild Homes and Gardens. It's called Loving Me, but I feel like it goes into the theme of everything we've been discussing. So here it is. Loving Me. I used to chase around the feeling of love as though it were a compulsion, an impulsion I couldn't resist. I used to be obsessed with the feeling of loving someone, anyone who wasn't me. One day it hit. I'd nothing left. No more feelings of love to give. I was forced to try to love myself. Journey was hard, and without fail, I sit back now after the battle of self-love has been won. And I think to myself, how wonderful it is to be loved. Diana Kouprina.
All right, well, thank you for sharing that. I was going to say that I liked, the concept of, loving yourself, trying to get that love from others and working through that.
Well, for me, it's been definitely a process, and I learned a lot on that journey. And just it's been a nice way to circle back through everything I've been and the trauma I sustained. When it comes to my poetry, all of it is really through experiences I've had that I weave into words as they come to me.
All right.
Give us another.
This one is published on the Wild nonprofit website. It's part of the Hardtail series, and the book of poetry, my book of poetry, is going to be coming out this December. This is one of the poems that will be featured in the book. It's called The Good Girl. The Good Girl. I always aimed to be the good girl, or earn the praise, the hugs, the love, the pats on the head for perfect ways. The girl who did no wrong, a girl consumed with notions of perfection, outshining every star in sight. I tried my best to reach perfection, to follow every rule they set, but within me lived a wild spirit, craving to understand the muted lines of gray, refusing to be tied down in a world where heaven collides into one with hell. I quieted the spirit's voice, silenced her, and paid the price, until she left me, mind and soul, alone on earth to survive. I wanted to be the good girl, earning for the world applause. But chasing after flawlessness, I never paused to grasp that good was never good enough. I had to break again on healing hands, learning on how to plant my soul, let it root, to let go, and to let it flourish. I did without accepting the cup. In turn, my rooted soul within the soil enlightened me one day during a floral bloom that mind, body, and the spirit all reside in harmony with one. That the only love I ever needed was my own and mine alone. Through soaring fire, I was never meant to tire. A good girl, never meant to be. For I am the phoenix rising higher through the flames. For all to see, reborn and rooted, this time from within. Diana Kouprina, the good girl.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Thoughts on that one before we move
Oh,
on? Or
no, I like that one. That was good. It was a good girl. Good girl.
Thank you.
I kind of like the transformation of that, of the, always trying to strive to be the good girl, and kind of that transformation to realize that, looking within and being who you are.
That has been a big switch that worked with me because as a child, I tried so hard to be a perfectionist. But I sent myself to boarding school. People usually are sent to boarding school. I sent myself to boarding school.
Okay.
Then trauma happened and I just lost it all. And through writing these poems, I really have been able to let it out basically and to finally get past and let go.
All right. Well, we appreciate you sharing these things. Before we share another one, if you'd like to share another one, tell us a little bit about your website and about your project.
Sure. So this summer, I co-founded While the Nonprofit, which is a nonprofit organization that's focused on, simply put, eradicating domestic violence from our homes. And as a survivor, that's a very important topic and a very personal one for me. And as a writer, I wondered, what are we lacking? How can we unite and give voices to survivors and to victims who really have none? Through the nonprofit, we started a publication, and that is focused on embracing and accepting new authors, new writing, poetry, and prose. And we're looking to publish an anthology of the shared poems. It's going to be titled Shared Tales, and it's also due to come out in 2024. For me specifically, I didn't want this to be a regular publishing. I believe in giving back. So we made sure that in our business, we support people who are receiving government benefits or any aid from the government. We make sure that if they wish to purchase or to participate in seminars or workshops that we lead, anything we do is discounted either at 50% or is completely free. And we evaluate each financial application on individual basis.
Sounds like great work. Where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Diana Kouprina, Kouprina. You can connect with Wild the Nonprofit at wildthenonprofit.com. That website really has everything you need to do. We tried to make it really simple. If you want to read some of my poetry that I've been reading from there, it's under Heart Tales. If you want to read some of the shared work we have from authors from all over, it's under Shared Tales. Basically, just play around with the website, enjoy. The content there is free. We also have a podcast and it's titled Wild the Podcast, and it's all under the same website. And again, the name is wildthenonprofit.com.
All right. Well, listeners, check it out. Let them know what you think about that. And you said you had a book coming out this December?
Yes, it's titled Hard Tales. So a similar theme as Shared Tales. That's how I came up with it as part of also my writing journey. Yeah, so Hard Tales is due to come out December, and it will include some of the poems I read and some poetry that I haven't published anywhere yet.
All right, we look forward to seeing that.
Okay, got another poem for us.
Sure, I'm wondering which poem would be sort of in theme of our discussions. I guess since we're circling back, there's a poem that I wrote 11 years ago. And at that time, I was simply clinging on to hope that there's something better and there's something more, but I was unable to feel it. I was extremely disassociated. It's titled Weary Soul. Very weary soul, you walked in sorrow all this way. The odyssey of torment is almost near. This is your time to breathe, to reflect upon the length you come. Sit upon this ancient tree stump, where once a mighty tree stood tall, now become a place of quiet rebirth. Amidst this open meadow you have uncovered, let the pain roll off your shoulders. Allow for stress to drift away into thin air. Hold on to the truth that lays before you as it awakens body, soul, and mind, making you whole once more. Follow the path that once consumed you. Allow it to illuminate the way. For in the end, it is your truth, the sole purpose of your soul. Diana Kouprina.
All right, thank you for sharing. Good imagery there. I could picture at the beginning, a lone person sitting there under a tree or on the stump of an old tree,
Yeah.
kind of contemplating and thinking about their life and what they got going on.
All my life, I've had a love for trees. It's the only thing I can draw too. I can draw really nice trees. When I first started with poetry, all I really wrote about were trees and leaves. So this is really paying homage, I guess.
Yeah, the poem I read on the first episode was about trees.
Oh, well, I need to listen to your first episode.
Listen to all of them.
Yeah, well,
They're good. They're good. This reminds me kind of like Mary's theme.
In a way, yeah, we've had a lot of our previous guests have shared some deep things or trauma they have dealt with
Right.
and things like that.
through pain, poetry is born.
Ah, yes.
Okay. Is that your quote or somebody else's?
It just came to my head, but I don't want to take any credit. I have no idea.
We'll take credit for sharing it with us. There you go.
I'll take credit for sharing, but I don't know if I'm copying anyone.
I believe a lot of poets would agree with you, though.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's been said in different ways or in similar ways by many, many others.
Matt and I have read poems like that to let out the grief and things.
Yeah.
All right, from here, we're going to move on a little bit from the episode. I have just a little bit of feedback to share. This is from Eric T., referring to episode 12. Hey guys, I just got done listening to episode 12, and I wanted to respond to the first of Peter's poems. His poem highlights a person who he saw in a way that was perhaps unexpected, and every single line grabbed my attention. I've been in that state before where a person is, as I believe he puts it, hypnotic, and you feel like you can see into them in a way that feels significant. Every line could summon for me a memory of a person who I felt needed to feel seen. For one of these people in particular, I felt a great burden of responsibility as the one who could see them to represent the world that they had given up on. Very powerful imagery in this poem, and I am glad to hear it put into words that others feel this way and that it inspires them to create. So thank you, Eric, for sharing that. As we wrap things up, I want to let our listeners know we are grateful that you've taken the time to tune in. We hope you're enjoying the poetry shared here, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out the website at www.you'rethepoet.com. There's a section there that answers questions about being a guest. Follow us on Facebook for updates and info, and send us an email to host@you'rethepoet.com for feedback or questions about the podcast and how to be our next guest. Now that the You're the Poet community is expanding at a rapid rate, we have set up a patron site for those who would like to show their support for You're the Poet. You can find us on buymeacoffee.com/You're the Poet. Thank you for your support as we continue to grow. Until next time, Phil, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Diana, thanks for being our guest.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you guys. Goodbye.